KWFM, South Tucson.
The views of this program are not necessarily those of KWFM, its management, or its sponsors. The host is solely responsible for the content.
Our guests today are Arnie Gunderson from an organization called Fairewinds, and Russell Lowe's, who's done a lot of financial analyst work around the monetary parts of nuclear power. And Mr. Gunderson has also done significant work in America, probably not just in America, given his background, on safety issues around nuclear power. Andrea Whitty from Connecting the Dots may show up momentarily. We thought it was important to bring up nuclear power given the events at Fukushima in Japan, and how that might change the tenor and context of the conversation, not only globally but in America, bringing forward a lot of issues that seem to be routinely suppressed, spun, or distorted, so that people don't have a complete understanding of what's wrong with the financing, what's wrong with the safety. But then when it appears that this plant that they've been proposing and carrying forward in Georgia was moving forward as though Fukushima never happened, I thought, my God, how can this be? Let's have a conversation about this. Let's understand this. Let's get our arms around it. And so Russell and Mr. Gunderson have been good enough to come on the show with us and see how we can push this down the road. Our call-in number is 529-3508. That's 529-3508. Mr. Gunderson, are you with us?
Yes, I am. Hi. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Welcome. And thank you for I mean this very heartfelt. Thank you very much for your good work. Simply put, but not simply done. And Russell, yourself as well. Thank you and welcome. Well, guys, what's your take? Did you have? It's not like I'm Pollyanna. I mean, I've had a ringside seat at the Abyss for 30 years, but I still had some hope that, given what happened at Fukushima, that there would be some pause, maybe enough scales falling from the eyes so that some critical mass of judgment might occur to start changing some of these issues around safety and financing. Did you guys at all have any of those thoughts, or you're smart? You're way smarter than me.
Well, I personally had thoughts that America might slow down a little bit, but not much hope for that. But what has been real hopeful and actually very productive is Germany has said that they will shut down all of the rest of their nuclear plants, and they shut down a handful right after Fukushima occurred. And now they're phasing out all the rest of them. Italy has resoundingly gone against their chief of state.
I didn't know they did that. So Italy said,
they are stopping any nuclear development. Brazil has put everything on hold. So there are countries around the world that are doing this. There are 9 countries in Europe that are not nuclear powers that are asking for a full cessation of nuclear power development in Europe.
So now Brazil, I'm trying to think, what do Brazil and Germany have in common? They're far more energy independent than other countries, like what Brazil does with fuel, and then Germany, to their credit, has done so much in solar production.
Well, Germany's becoming energy independent. And
that's a relative term.
They are occasionally reaching 20% of their total energy output with solar at one instant.
Right.
But not 20% of total energy for the day or the year.
But that has to influence the probabilities on how decisions get made.
Yes. But Arnie, how do you feel that the U.S. has reacted in this whole thing?
Well, when I saw Fukushima happen, I told my wife, I am personally not going to let this get covered up like Three-Mile Island and like Chernobyl. I'm just not going to do it. So we, at the expense of our business, of Fairewinds business, we just dedicated the last year to keeping public attention on this thing. If we had relied on the mainstream media, we would think that nuclear is absolutely safe. So, I guess I wasn't that we would try to cover this thing up, and I guess that but like Russ said, I think some countries the message, and the one that's on the fence is Japan. They're trying to start 2 nukes up out of perhaps 40 of their 50. They had 54. They lost 4 in the accident at Daiichi 1, 2, 3, 4. They likely lost 5 and 6, but then there's another about 10 that are certainly in jeopardy from the tsunami and also from the seismic issue. So perhaps Japan is down to 40 nuclear plants, and they had 7 million people write to Congress, write to the Diet, saying we don't want to do this. So I'm hopeful for Japan, even though the government doesn't seem to get the message yet.
Well, didn't Tokyo Electric, they're sort of metering out what the costs are, and as part of how they're doing this cover-up, instead of saying it might be $500 billion to clean it up, they're saying, it's going to be 30, and next week it's 33, and they're really misrepresenting stuff.
Yeah, it's death by a thousand words, as opposed to they if they were to admit to the people that this is a $500 billion problem, they would have rebellion on their hands. So it's better every 3 months to say, it's another 20 billion here and another 20 billion there.
So that they got 7 million letters, and people didn't know the whole story. My God. I mean, what's that the equivalent of in terms of the U.S. population? What is the Japanese population?
140 million. So
140 million.
More than twice. So it would be the equivalent of these are not emails. These were hand signatures on documents.
That's like 15 million letters.
14 to 20 million letters being delivered to Congress.
Yeah, we've never had that in the United States. We've never had that kind of participation, protest, or any otherwise for any particular issue, even for our national parks or for anti-war or anything like that.
Yeah, well, let me ask a question, but then we're probably going to have to go to break here for a minute, Arnie. In terms of the design of this facility at Fukushima and what it has in common with U.S. facilities, isn't this one of the original designs where they stored the spent rods in a tower in the air, and they don't have a clue on how to remove it from the water because it bursts into flames when you remove it, and then it becomes atmospheric?
Yes, all 4 of the units that are in trouble, and 23 similar ones in the United States. And
there's 23 in the United States that are this design? Yes,
that's correct.
Wow. Now, I've been told that there might be, I forget, I'm losing whether it's pounds or tons, but suffice it to say the amount of nuclear waste in these towers in Japan is 25% of the volume that these towers at the 23 plants that are built like it in America have inside them. There's 4 times more in the U.S. plants.
The Japanese were relatively conscientious, and they got most of the fuel out of their spent fuel pools. But the Americans keep their fuel pools full, and the reason is money. It costs a lot of money to empty the fuel pool, and of course
they don't want to spend it because they want to protect the ratepayers.
No, they want to protect their bottom line.
Yeah, Arnie, we've got to go to break here. We'll be back in just a second. 529-3508. Okay, we are back. Our guests are Arnie Gunderson from Fairewinds Research Group and Russell Lowe's, who does financial analysis around nuclear power plants, and Andrea Whitty from Connecting the Dots has just joined us. Before we went to break, we were talking about the design of Fukushima and that there's 23 plants in the United States that are built with basically the same blueprints. And the tower where they store the waste in these is a tower in the air, not made out of hardened concrete. Planes could fly into it, and they as yet have developed no way to remove the stuff from these towers to put in some quote-unquote happy fantasy idea of a permanent location. And they keep in Fukushima said, well, we'll be ready in 4 years. Well, don't have an idea. Don't you talk about 4 years? You know? Now, Mr. Gunderson just said that the plants in the United States, while the same design, that their towers where the stuff is stored hold 400% more volume than the ones in Japan. So that was our jumping off point.
When the pools are intact, you can remove the nuclear fuel. You do it all underwater, and you put it into a very heavy shielded cask, and then it goes to something called dry cask storage. Fukushima had dry cask storage, and all the dry casks survived the earthquake and the tsunami. Mm-hmm. But in the U.S., we're not doing that. We're keeping all the fuel in the pool, which is an enormous public health risk.
Now, so how many years worth of fuel are stored in those since they were built?
In Vermont here, the pool is solid. We've got 33 years there. They couldn't fill it anymore, so they had to take some out. So we have some in dry cask, but still the fuel pool is full. And the reason is that Entergy, the owner of the plant, it's not coming out of ratepayers. These guys are a merchant plant. They just make money on selling it into the grid. If they were to empty the pool, it would come out of their pocket, and they'd wind up with easily a $100 million hit. But if they wait until the plant is decommissioned...
That's just what I wanted to get at, right.
If they wait until the plant is shut down for good, then it comes out of the decommissioning fund.
Oh, my God.
And another party pays for it.
So, back to the corporate scheme modus operandi of externalizing your overhead. Not only do they want profits, profits are okay, but it's the way they maximize their profits by externalizing their overhead. I mean, the plant in Georgia and many of these other plants, if something goes wrong, the taxpayers pay for it. These guys aren't liable or responsible financially for the consequences of their decisions. And so, it's like, they want to build a hotel in downtown Tucson, but when you read the contract and you see that, oh, no, they want the taxpayers to be responsible if the room night occupancy isn't enough. And same thing with the Happy Fantasy for the arena. You read the contract and, it's the taxpayers who are on the hook. So this is like modus operandi trick number 3, that no matter what the industry, these guys try and put on the American population.
Well, on top of that, the Nuclear Regulatory Commission has allowed a number of nuclear reactors to be spun off into LLCs, or limited liability companies. And if those companies go under, which is very likely, the taxpayer will be footing the bill for the vast majority of the decommissioning of these plants. And we're talking like $1 billion per reactor or more.
So this LLC thing is just a streamlined way to create the externalization of the cost?
It's a shell game.
It's a shell game.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And so you would think we'd be slowing down. That was your original hypothesis,
right,
that you presented at the beginning of the program. But instead, we're promoting promoting additional reactors. We have the Vogtle plants. We have other plants that are being planned, and the Vogtle plant just recently got a loan fee offered to it by the DOE, the Department of Energy, for 0.2% to 0.63%, somewhere in there. So when you go to buy a car, or when you go to buy a house,
or a student loan,
or you get a student loan, you pay a couple points or a few points on that loan, at least 1 point. This massive plant, which the Congressional Budget Office has said has a 50% chance of default or higher, is getting a a loan fee of 0.2 to 0.6%.
You couldn't get a loan on a house if they thought there was a 50% chance you couldn't make the payments.
No, well, that's what the
But see,
the GAO
Russell, I think
also.
these guys are getting screwed. That's not fair. They could have gone to the Federal Reserve and gotten it for nothing. They're making them pay something? I don't even believe that.
That is ultimately their plan. Their ultimate plan is to get the U.S. government to become socialized enough. While they decry socialism, they are getting the U.S. government to become socialized enough to be able to fund these plants completely out of taxpayers' pockets.
Well, wait a minute. This is a strange... Speaking of hybrid reactors, so these guys are socialists in the back door and capitalists in the front door. They want to say, we're capitalists, we're smart guys, we take risks, we make we build things, and yet we don't want to be connected with the consequences. We don't have enough faith in our own judgment and ability and efforts to even stand by the crap we build. We want to leave it on your doorstep.
So, Arnie, what would happen if one of these plants went down? Like, what would happen if Vermont Yankee or, say, Palo Verde in Arizona, a three-unit reactor system, went down with say, a plane hit to the cooling tower rooms?
Palo Verde's a little different.
To the spent fuel pond rooms.
Yeah, Palo Verde's a little different, but the Vermont Yankee. There's actually been a study by Brookhaven National Laboratory, certainly not a hotbed of anti-nuclear activity.
No.
But anyway, Brookhaven said that if the fuel pool were to drain, you'd have a fire, and that's for sure. And the fire would release as much radiation as every nuclear weapon that's ever been exploded in the atmosphere.
Oh, my God.
And it would cause the permanent evacuation of a 40-mile radius circle. And it would cause in excess of 100 million cancers, 100,000 cancers, rather. I'm sorry. So it's and yet the NRC does not move the fuel out of the pools. Now here's their argument: the NRC is making. Well, if we move the fuel out of the pool, the workers are going to be more exposed, and so therefore we have to take into account worker exposure as we're moving the fuel.
God. That's the first time they've ever cared about workers.
Well, that's exactly right.
Jesus.
Because when these plants were younger, it used to take 90 days to move the fuel. And now utilities have gotten it down to where they can move it in 15, which increases worker exposure.
Right.
So where was the NRC when we were shuffling fuel fast? They were on the sidelines. But now that we want to move the fuel down and protect the public, the NRC is saying, oh, we got to worry about worker exposures.
You know, Mr. Gunderson, just for my own edification, in terms of the history of nuclear power, someone said to me that the reason it came into existence was to solve a problem that the Pentagon or the Defense Department had around weapons production. And so if that's the case, we're sort of stumbling and not recovering our balance, where we're making a set of bad decisions to solve a bad decision and then do this other set of bad decisions. So if it wasn't really needed for power, but they sold it that way, but they were really solving a problem for the weapons industry as how to deal with a byproduct. And now there's all these, how do you deal with the fuel rod? So it's like Band-Aid over Band-Aid over Band-Aid.
I think you're right. We would not be using enriched uranium nuclear power plants were it not for the bomb program.
Wow. That's true.
Yeah. Maybe scientists would have come up with a different design, but the design we have is driven because we had a bomb program.
Wow.
It's very true. And then, so if we were to have, say, some kind of problem like you were referring to, Arnie, with the Vermont plant, or say Palo Verde perhaps, what would be the damages? How long would that area be, off limits?
At least 300 and possibly thousands of years. It's an extraordinarily long amount of time. Because what happens when you have a fuel pool fire is you not only volatilize the cesium, which is a muscle seeker and a bad actor, but you also volatilize the plutonium. And plutonium, named after Pluto, the god of hell, is the nastiest element out there. Can I touch on one thing? We were talking about socializing risk and
certainly. No, Arnie, no, we've got to go to break here in a minute. So, if it's a big one, we're going to have to finish it in the next quarter when we come back. So, launch into it, but no, we might have to stop you.
Okay, Florida is planning 4 new nukes. They will add 9% to the capacity of the grid, but they will double the capital cost of all of the power plants in the state. What's that going to mean? That means that Floridians are going to pay double their electric rate. Now, we all know that won't happen, so what will happen is that the loan guarantees that these plants are going to be built under are going to shift that risk to Arizona or up to Vermont, so that the Floridians don't have to pay the high electric for the plants that they're about to buy.
You mean they're going to socialize the cost into the larger pool of the entire U.S. population as opposed to just the population of Florida?
That's right.
All right. We're going to break. We'll be back in a minute. 529-3508. Okay, we are back talking about nuclear power, scales falling from our eyes, scales on the pipes. Yeah. Mr. Gunderson was talking about externalizing both financial risks and also harm. Mr. Gunderson, wasn't there one or maybe even 2 locations in Southern California where there were plants that were shut down that have really never been, not never been, but hardly ever talked about, where there's high cancer rates that have been going on for generations?
Well, the first major nuclear accident in the country was at Santa Susana, which is outside of L.A.
So everybody thinks it was 3 Mile Island, but that's not the case.
It was worse than 3 Mile Island.
Worse than 3 Mile Island?
The government covered it up for 20 or 30 years.
Wow.
It was a research reactor, and the ground is still contaminated to this day. And there's all sorts of associated cancers. Scientists are just now beginning to realize how serious that accident was.
What year did that happen?
Russ, you remember for sure? I think it was 59.
Yeah, it was the late 50s, I know. But 59 is a good guess.
It was about 40 miles outside of L.A., and of course back then it was it was shrubs and
it was boonies.
But of course, as people have moved in, no one's told them the soil is contaminated. And there are some meaningful...
you mean it wasn't on the listing?
No.
No, damn. Crap, Arnie.
Disclosures.
So that reactor, we've had a whole slew of mishaps, too. I mean, we've had a reactor in Ohio that... the reactor vessel is 12 inches thick.
Steel.
Of stainless steel.
Right.
And there was a boric acid problem in one of the reactors in Ohio that came down to 3/16 of an inch thick. And they said if that plant had gone on for 6 more months of operation, they probably would have had a full-scale meltdown.
Now, you make me think of something that was going on at San Onofre. Can you talk about how they remodeled San Onofre, Arnie?
There's Fairewinds just put up a report an hour ago, and Associated Press and some of the others are covering it today. What happened was the San Onofre steam generators were about 30 years old and needed to be replaced. So they went out and replaced them. And this used to be a matter of relative routine, except that the folks at Southern California Edison really juiced this one up and added more tubes and took out structural supports, etc.
So let me say this a little bit differently for our listeners. They when they took out the structural stuff, it weakened the safety in the design. But they wanted to do that to add more tubes so they could have more power, sell more electricity, and make more money.
That's exactly right.
And so...
What happened was...
Who approved that? It was stunning to me is that somebody other than an employee of that company had to approve that design. And even to an untutored person, that... flaw in the thinking in that design had to be evident. No one. And so, can you talk about were there objections raised? Did people understand this going into this?
That's a great question. They made a strategic decision that they wouldn't tell the NRC, and then they
wait a minute. Is this PG&E?
No, this is Southern California Edison.
Oh,
there's a thing called 5059, and their first decision was we're going to change the steam generators, and we're going to do it without amending the license.
God, I can't even build a tough shed without a permit. What are you talking about, man?
Right, you got it. And so what happened was that they all of the analysis after that supported the strategic decision at the beginning that they weren't going to approve the license. And that happened in 05, 06. Well, in 2011, one of the steam generators, in 2012 rather, a steam generator had just been run for 10 months, and it started to blow tubes. And we've just discovered today that over 100 tubes were half worn or more. And, of course, what the Fairewinds report that just came out today shows that all of the tubes that had to be plugged, there's 1,300 plugs that had to be inserted in those two units. If you look at all the other nuclear reactors, they only needed 300 plugs. So San Onofre has 4 times more plugs in it than all the other nuclear reactors in the country.
So if one of those tubes breaks, there's an immediate atmospheric release. Do I have that right?
Yes. Actually, it happened once back in the 90s where one tube broke completely, and it released 50,000 gallons of nuclear reactor coolant to the side of the plant that's supposed to be clean. And the problem with San Onofre is it wouldn't stop at one tube. These things would cascade like popcorn popping.
And there's 9,600 of them in each one?
Yes, and you could easily have a couple hundred blow had there been,
Good grief.
Tube failure.
Good grief. Russell?
Arnie, you've worked with the nuclear industry for 40 years. You ended up as a vice president of a nuclear company, and then you came to see that things weren't being implemented properly. But with what you're talking about today in Southern California, is this a deterioration of what used to be a better situation, or has it always been this way?
I actually think that at least no, it's always been this way. I think I was kidding myself in the 70s and 80s when I was a senior VP.
Mm-hmm. Good man.
In the 90s, when I blew the whistle, the NRC deliberately botched the inspection of my concerns, and the NRC was taking bribes from my employer. It took Senator John Glenn in congressional hearings to exonerate me. And not every whistleblower can get to Senator John Glenn for congressional hearings, unfortunately. Right. And even then, though, Russ, it convinced me that regulation was lax, but it didn't make me. Right. It didn't turn me. I thought nuclear power was a good idea even then. Right. It was Fukushima that really flipped me completely over. And that's because we're talking about, to use Donald Rumsfeld, the unknown unknowns. Right. Mother Nature can always throw something at us that we didn't anticipate.
They don't. They're too arrogant. There's too much hubris to take into consideration chaos theory. Mm-hmm. We've got a caller. Joe, are you still with us?
Hey, I can't even tell you how great this discussion is, you guys. I just want to chime in. I think this is another shining example of how we have, we're in the information age, but yet the secrecy prevails, and just the political elites. You look at the failures left.
Hey, they had to use the Freedom of Information Act to get information out of the Department of Justice to find out what the interest rate on the goddamn loan was.
Well, there's SACE.org, that's SACE.org. They had to do a Freedom of Information Act request just to be able to find out, as you say,
the interest rate.
What the origination fees were for a loan, as if that's a big proprietary secret that the taxpayers who are funding this shouldn't know.
Well, but unfortunately it happens at the same time when student loans are higher than what they're charging these guys, so that as a backdrop starts to become a vivid damn.
Mm-hmm. Yes. This whole issue is so absurd to me because nuclear power is not economical to begin with. For new nuclear power, you're talking 24 cents a kilowatt hour of delivered electricity. And energy efficiency is 3 cents a kilowatt hour, 1/8 the cost of nuclear power. Photovoltaics now have gone below 18 cents per kilowatt hour, and wind is down below 12 cents per kilowatt hour delivered.
Right.
And so the whole thing is just like it's unneeded. It is really just a machine for re-election of people who support their agenda, largely Republicans.
I remember interviewing a friend of mine who years ago was going to run for the U.S. Senate in Arizona, didn't like nuclear, went to Washington to talk to the DNC, came back and was a proponent of nuclear. I thought, what am I, watching the invasion of the body snatchers? I mean, this guy, they had some conversion and drank the Kool-Aid? It's like they had to have told, I mean, I know how this works. We will only support you if you support this. And Russell's absolutely right.
Well, we projected the cost of Palo Verde in 1978 for 1986 completion. We projected $6.1 billion. The utilities projected $2.8. They use sales pitches. We use scientific regression analysis. Right. We ended up 4% off. They came in at $5.9 billion. We were $0.2 billion off. Really, really tightly close because we used objective scientific approach.
Right.
They know now that these plants are going to cost double of what they are saying. It's just how to get them built.
Right.
They know if they lowball the estimate, they can get them built.
Right.
I like how private insurance absolutely won't even touch us with a 10-foot pole. All these conservatives, these free market guys, they put away that roaring lion of free market, pull your bootstraps up, and they pull this mouse out that, it's just there's nothing market related there. If it couldn't survive on its own, it should go by the wayside.
Right.
But suddenly these guys fall.
It's just a way to steal money.
Mm-hmm.
It's free enterprise for the poor and socialism for the rich, or socialism for the large companies that don't really need it.
Right. It's a redistribution. It's bad enough it's a redistribution of wealth, shrinking the middle class, creating more poverty, but it's also environmentally and biologically putting everybody at risk. I mean, talk about a death dance with destiny. Hey, thank you, Joe. We've got to take a call from Mike. Michael, are you there?
Thanks for taking my call.
Yeah.
Great show. To Joe's point, it's nice hearing real news and real information for a change, instead of this nonsense that we are permeated with every day. My question is really a simple one. How big of a bus needs to T-bone our society before we wake up? We've known about the nukes. We've known about the risks. China Syndrome movie way back in the 60s elevated the issue, and then all of a sudden it went away. Competing technologies are not only shunned, but ridiculed. We know about the vaporized carburetors that are capable of putting out 1,000 miles per gallon that exist, but they're hidden away in some
They just need to propose building a nuclear power plant next to the White House, and let's see how quickly they start talking about safety.
Well, and real quickly, I'm in the energy field. I've been doing this for a long, long time. I'm very familiar with competing technologies, and I've seen them come and go. There's magnetic metallurgies that are 20 times more efficient that can be used in the electric motors. There's renewable hemp and bamboo that has much higher energy property than soy or corn or some of the other things that we're getting ethanol from. It is exactly what Joe said, and we all, and you guys talked about the privatization of profit and the socialization of debt. This thing is, unfortunately, came to a point to where both parties, and this is a statistic that's interesting real quick, and that is both parties say that only 4% of the electorate are well informed. So that's why they're getting away with it.
Yeah.
It's because we have not done our part as citizens to become engaged, and become educated, and therefore us driving the policy from the people up instead of where it is today.
Right.
But thanks for the great work, and thanks for your show. I appreciate it very much.
Thank you, Michael. Arnie and Russell, we've got about 8 or 9 minutes left. In the remaining time, are there some issues you would like to get at and cover that we haven't been able to get to so far?
One thing I wanted to mention is that Arizona passed what's called a Senate concurrent memorial. It basically just means a Senate endorsement. The House and the Senate passed this. It was a proposal by Senator Al Melvin, to make Arizona the nuclear waste dump for the entire United States.
We should call him Al Meltdown.
Well, see, people call him Atomic Al.
Atomic Al?
Yeah, that's kind of the name that goes around. But so he's proposing a whole slew of activities to occur. One would be that the Arizona would become a reprocessing center for the United States. We would be the breeder reactor fuel line for the entire United States. Breeder reactors have had $150 billion put into them over the years, and they have not produced a single year's worth of economic electricity. There have been 15 breeder reactors done all over the United States, France, Russia, and we've gotten zero out of it, really. It's a pie-in-the-sky pipe dream, and that has not yielded anything. And he's, Senator Melvin, with all due respect, has been putting out information that is like comic book sourced, essentially. He has been saying that France does reprocessing and uses 95% of the fuel's value.
Wait a minute.
It's been shown in study after study that the most you can technically get out of this fuel is 1.6%, and that would be extremely expensive to do.
If it was working so great for France, they wouldn't be dumping it in the Canadian Antarctic, right?
Well, yeah, France actually has a pipeline off of La Hague that is dumping low-level waste that is being pushed by the currents all the way up to the Canadian Arctic Circle, and they've been sued by several countries in Europe.
How come the World Trade Organization isn't suing about that, Russell? I'm just confused, man.
In a better world.
Yeah?
And finally, something that Republicans can admire about France.
That's right.
You don't usually see them on the side of the French.
But one thing I would like to ask Arnie, where do we go from here?
Yeah.
Where do we go from here in safety? Where is Fairewinds going? I mean, you have a huge amount of experience in the nuclear industry and have an insight that hardly anybody in the nation has.
Right.
Well, I'm against building new nukes.
Right.
And I think the 23 that are identical to Fukushima should be shut down.
Absolutely.
I don't think it's plausible to shut down the other 80 immediately, but
right.
I think, a deal's a deal. We had a 40-year deal with these guys. At the end of 40, that's it, and don't give them another 20. And the last piece is the people that are convinced that nuclear power is viable are going to have you believe that you can store nuclear waste for 1 million years. That's part of the belief system. You have nuclear, and by the way, we know we can store nuclear waste for 1 million years. Those same people are saying, well, we can't do solar because we haven't figured out how to store the electricity overnight.
Oh my God! Where are the straitjackets, Arnie? Oh my God!
Well, it's just on the face of it. Arizona should be the solar capital of the world.
And what's happening there is
energy.
Arizona has fallen so far behind right now. It is in the bottom 4 states for renewable energy right now.
It's insane. And
hey, I had an energy company representative standing before the mayor and council about 10 years ago, who, when challenged why we didn't have more solar here, actually said, we have too much sun. It doesn't work when there's too much beyond a certain amount. And I thought I was in Never Never Land.
He, of course, has gotten mixed up by the claim that when you increase the temperature, your efficiency goes down. But the thing is, your efficiency, if you have, say, 110 degrees, goes down a little bit. But because the sun availability of sunlight goes up so much, it wipes out that 5% several times over.
Right.
And so, it's just taking information and completely contorting it.
Right. Arnie, anything else?
No, I think that we need to push renewables conservation.
Right.
If we just behaved like the French, we wouldn't need a new power plant for 40 years because their per capita consumption is low, and the way they structure their rates, the more you use, the more you pay. That's an incentive.
That's an incentive, absolutely.
And over 70% of their population is against building any new nukes also.
Well, it's like de Gaulle said, how can you control a people that have more than 600 cheeses? He knew that there was going to be safety there. You can't lie to a population like that. Well, Arnie, thank you very much.
Well, thanks for having me. I
Absolutely,
appreciate it.
Absolutely. Russell, anything else you want to cover? Want to mention before we're?
I would just say people need to really get alert to what's going on with this L. Melvin plan, Atomic L, and this concurrent memorial, SB 1548, is just an atrocity, and they're going to be asking Congress to use Arizona for all the nuclear waste dumping in the United States. People should be up in arms about this, writing their senators,
we have a glowing future.
Meeting with their senators, meeting with their legislators, writing them, and voting them out of office.
And, of course, he's doing this because this is how he wants to fund public education.
Right.
Now they become concerned about kids, only when they can use them as a dumping ground for nuclear waste.
He actually has a 0% rating by the Arizona Education Network. 0 for voting for children.
Well, for people who believe that education can enhance individuals, that's an admission on their part that he's simply not educable. I mean, this guy's a waste of time. So we're gonna finish up some business here, Dan.
We've got about one more minute. And,
before you need,
we can come back.
No. I had it wrong.
Okay.
So when does Palo Verde? When's the end of its life?
Well, Palo Verde has 3 reactors. The first one went into operation in 82, then 84, and then 86. And they have 40-year licenses, but they already got their 20-year licenses extension. And, that would be like designing...
Well, let's do it while things are good.
That would be like designing a car to last 60 years. These things they have pipes in all of these reactors that are submerged in moisture and water that weren't designed for that. They have electrical wiring through the cement structures at the base of the plants, through the basements essentially, and these plants weren't designed for it. As these plants get older, the chance of meltdowns, the chance of huge radiological releases goes up dramatically, and this is going to become a more common occurrence. First we had the reactor in L.A., and we had a number of other reactors, including 3 Mile Island. We had Chernobyl. We had Fukushima. Things are going to start happening quicker and quicker.
Oh yeah,
and
that's an awful thought.
The CO2 costs from rebuilding cities, from rebuilding natural habitats, the CO2 emissions are going to be higher than that of coal per kilowatt hour. Nuclear has a huge life cycle, so to say, that emits a lot of CO2.
So if they stop, I think Palo Verde pays like a third of all the property taxes in Maricopa County. So if they ever stop it, that means everybody's property taxes are going to go up a whole bunch, which is the least of it. Is the least of it.
Well, you would replace that with solar and other things that would increase the value and bring in property taxes also. Right. So I don't think that's really that much of an issue.
No. Thank you, Russell. Thank you, Arnie. Thank you, Andrea.
Thanks.
Be back next week.